Have you been able to figure out what Donald Trump's endgame is for America's foreign policy and role in the world in the second term? His national security strategy, as you know, released last November, recognizes that our country, quote, needs a coherent, focused strategy for how we interact with the world. But this mainly seems to be a strategy for pulling back from the world and declaring, that the affairs of other countries are our concern only if their activities threaten our interests. And so, he seems to want dominance over the Western hemisphere, but otherwise, it's hard to figure out what he's after. Do you see any coherence or grand strategy to the Trump foreign policy as it's being implemented?
I don't think there is any. Well, actually, I don't know if you would agree. I'll just state my opinion and you can agree or disagree. But I don't think that there is any grand strategy or any real destination that Trump is trying to reach. In fact, I have written that it's kind of a fool's errand to try to impose meaning on his foreign policy, which seems to be a collection of more or less random impulses motivated by considerations such as, how can I, Donald J. Trump, appear strong? How can I get attention? How can I make money for myself and my family and my colleagues? Very little of it, as far as I can tell, is motivated by what is truly in the best interests of the United States, because, of course, on both economic and national security policy, Trump is flying in the face of more than 70 years of received wisdom among both Democrats and Republicans. Now, unless you're truly a member of the cult and think that Trump is a million times smarter than every previous president we've had, going back to FDR, and he and Stephen Miller are, eons beyond, George Shultz and Henry Kissinger and Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice and Dean Acheson and George Marshall and every other major figure we've seen in American foreign policy since World War II. So unless you believe that, you would have to kind of say, maybe those other bipartisan leaders going back 70 years knew what they were doing in promoting a policy based on America's security alliances, principally NATO and our transatlantic relationship, and based on free trade. And of course, Trump is trashing both of those ideals to one extent or another. And what is he replacing it with? Really, really hard to know. I mean, because as we've seen, for example, with tariffs, they literally seem to vary based on what he has for breakfast or how he feels after talking with the leader. He acknowledged a couple of weeks ago that he raised tariffs on Switzerland because he did not like the way the president of Switzerland talked to him, making me wonder, like, okay, but why is that a good reason to make American consumers pay more for Swiss goods? And of course, to Trump's mind, he won't even admit that American consumers or companies actually pay the cost of tariffs. He lives in an alternative reality where foreign countries pay the cost of tariffs. So it's very hard to use kind of traditional reasoning, evidence, or anything else, policy analysis, to really and apply that to the Trump foreign policy. I think it really defies description.
And I want to remind you that next week, Wednesday, March 4th, at this very, very time, the extraordinary American documentary filmmaker Ken Burns and historian author Rick Atkinson will be in conversation with Pat Morrison on Revolutionary Crossroads, how America's founding era illuminates today's struggle for America's future. Thank you so much for being with us. And once again, Max, thank you so much.